Welcome back to the Motorcyclist Journey. Today we're going to do part one of this next conversation, and I say part one because when you're talking to two individuals who both have well over 1,000,000 miles on BMW motorcycles, it takes a while to go through the journey. Many of you know Paul and Voni Glaves. They live down in Big Bend now. I've had a place there for many years and have been around the MOA much longer than I can remember. But today we're going to talk to them about how they got started, some interesting things. How they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary is really cool if you haven't seen it before. And this first video goes from how they got into motorcycling and how they got started up to the purchase of a bike I think many of us know, a 93 R1100 RS known as Big Red, that Voni still rides today from time to time, and where the red leathers and the red outfits and the red jacket and the red theme came from is part of this video, and I think you'll really enjoy the backstory and how that came about, and get to know Paul and Voni a little bit better. Back on the bike by spring and ready to ride to Tennessee in June.
There you go.
My wife has a different opinion.
Well, Voni and I have had differences from time to time, but not often.
So I have seen, I've actually seen some of the posts where you guys renewed the vows in the Rio Grande and stuff.
Right.
How did you start doing that? That was fantastic.
Oh, that was our 50th wedding anniversary. So
That
we
was neat.
decided we rounded up the local justice of the peace, and he met us in the middle of the river during a festival.
Right.
And so we renewed our vows after 50 years.
That's great. Well, the August will be 38 for us.
There you go.
So we're just getting started.
All right.
So I reached out and thank you guys for reaching back out to me. How'd you guys get started in riding? Was it something that you did together, or one of you started first and then the other got involved? Or?
Yeah, I'll tell the short version of my story because Bonnie's is a little longer, but a little more interesting. Bonnie,
Ah,
I bought a moped, Sears and Robuck all-state moped made by Pugh in Austria when I was 14 years old. And I said at the time that if it had two wheels and didn't have a motor, I wasn't interested anymore. I lived in Grand Forks, North Dakota, a town of about 25,000 people at that time. It was a mile to high school, 2 miles to the only swimming pool, and buying a motorized moped that would go 30 miles an hour when you're 14 years old is liberating. And I've been essentially riding two-wheel motorcycles ever since.
tell them about your first ride.
Wait a minute. Here you go. Can you see that picture?
Hold it up just a little higher. Yep.
That's
I remember
me.
those.
That's me in a sport coat and dress trousers on the Sunday morning after I bought that moped on Saturday.
That's fantastic. If you've
And
seen the
I got up and I get ready to go ride my moped, and my mother looks at me and says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to go ride my moped." And she said, "No, you're not. You're going to church." So I said, "Okay, then I'm riding my moped to church." And I put on my sport coat and my dress pants, and off to church I went.
Well, you definitely look better than I do in my first motorcycle picture. If you've seen the one on the cover of the channel, the guy with no shirt on sitting on the old Airhead was me at about 13.
Well, so that's how I got started. And then for a while when I was in high school, I became sort of a motorhead. cars. But when I was in the Air Force, I was stationed in a little radar site up in North Dakota, and I was driving through this town of 700 people, and there on the sidewalk was a motorcycle for sale. It was a Yamaha 250 something or other, vintage about 1964 or 5. And I bought it for $200. It lasted a couple of months and threw a rod. And then I was shipped to Alaska, came back, and went to get parts to fix that motorcycle and couldn't get them. This was a 5 or 6 year old motorcycle. Yamaha couldn't get me all the parts, so I traded that motorcycle in, rolling chassis with the engine and transmission in a box. Got as much for the trade-in as I paid for it, and bought a new 1974 Yamaha RD 250. And I owned at least one and usually multiple motorcycles ever since.
Yep. It's an addiction.
Yeah, I call it a hobby run amok.
Yes. And I always tell my wife the right number of bikes is N+1, N being the number that I have in the garage
Yeah.
at any given time.
Yeah, Voni can add real wisdom to that.
So Voni, how'd you get started in this world?
Well, back when we were living in
Lone Tree.
Lone Tree, Iowa.
Yeah.
We had rented a house out in the country, and Paul loved to give us rides. He would give me a ride, he would give one of the kids a ride, he would give another kid a ride, and then he would give the dog a ride. Everyone loved it. And he was getting kind of worn out from all that. And he said, if you learn to ride, we could all go at the same time. And I said, well, I can't imagine doing that. That's, nothing. I had never seen a woman on a motorcycle.
What she actually told me was I was nuts.
So I said, no, I can't. And he had this beautiful Yamaha, and he kept saying, you should ride it. And I'd say, it's beautiful, and it's spotless, and I would tip it over and break something, and I don't want to do that. So we were having this long discussion, and I was saying no, and he was saying, try. Why don't you? Anyway, we went up to my sister's cabin in Minnesota, and they had an old dirt bike that every kid had driven off some cliff, and it had been ground in the ground.
As they should be.
But it ran. And
Yes.
so I said, well, maybe I'll give it a try. I put on a helmet, and I saw this gravel road, which looked kind of scary, but there was an alfalfa field to the side. And I thought, well, if I just ride through that, if I fall down, it'll be really soft. And, but I didn't think about an alfalfa field is not a smooth place to ride. It's pretty bumpy. And I didn't fall off even with that. So when I came back, I had a little bit of that motorcycle lean in my blood. And I started to think that maybe, and Paul kept encouraging me until the evening he came home and handed me the keys to his motorcycle and a broken taillight.
Turn signal.
That was easier to break off. And he said, look, I hit a piece of sand in the parking lot, and I tipped over, and I broke this off, and I'm not going to put it back on or fix it till you give it a try. So I said, okay, then yes, it's not spotless, and it wouldn't be terrible. And so I did ride it around the country house that we had, through the apple orchard and just around in my yard. And he kept encouraging me. So at the time I was terrified, but I've learned in my life, when you're really scared, maybe there's a reason that you should try it anyway.
Yep. So how many guesstimate, how many miles do you think you've put on a bike since then?
On that bike?
On any bike.
Oh, well, she's got an award. She's got an award from BMW.
Yes.
for 1,100,000 miles.
And that's on BMWs.
That's on BMWs.
So now
Yes.
you add in the
Doesn't even
Yamaha.
count the Yamaha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Add in 100 miles in my yard before I ever dared to leave my yard. I was really wanting to build my confidence, and we had a big acreage there that we were renting. And so I would just go out and like drive around cones to practice or whatever. And
around the barn and around the pig pen and around the apple orchard and around the house.
And then when I got really brave, I went out on the gravel road and we had a mile to the pavement. So I would drive that mile of gravel, turn around at the pavement and come back to the house.
Now this-
so that I was getting used to driving on a road.
This was in eastern Iowa, about 15 or so miles outside of Iowa City. And
My daughter lives.
That part of Iowa has a mile square grid of gravel roads.
Oh yes, we were up there in.
To this day, she's a better gravel road rider than I am because she put her first 1,000 miles outside of the yard. And the only time she saw pavement is that she came to a stop sign and crossed the paved road to go right on the gravel some more.
To me, the pavement was traffic, and traffic could hurt you. And I wasn't going to hurt myself, but traffic could hurt me. So I really didn't want to go on pavement. In fact, I remember we had a fall festival in Lone Tree, and there's street dance and all kinds of great fun things going on. And this group of BMW motorcycles drove into town together, you know, like in the B movies. And they were all just really duded out with black leather and whatever. And they got off the bikes, and I was fascinated with those bikes. So I just walked over to look at them, and they started talking to me, and I told them I was learning to ride. And they said, "Good for you." I've never really had anybody tell me I shouldn't ride. I've had a whole lot of people in my life saying you should, you know? So I was talking with them, and I said, you know, but I don't really think it would be safe to go over 20 miles an hour. That was about how fast I was driving.
So then they invited her to ride to Daytona with them.
Yeah.
From Iowa to Daytona on your first road trip.
But I was, again, intrigued with really not just motorcycle riding, but going someplace like Florida. Wow. You know, and Paul and I
she did not make that trip.
Right.
not that one. But I would have still been on my way there when they were headed back home. But what we did was get a tent and sleeping bags, and we got another Yamaha, just like Paul's, and we loaded up with the kids. When we'd have 2 weeks of summer vacation, we would head out for a week and then head back for a week and just wander. Really, we'd go where looked interesting to go. And what one of the fun things was when we'd be camped in a campground, and in the morning, people would just stop whatever they were doing, seeing how we could get all the stuff that we had out and spread around back on the motorcycles and plop the kids and take off.
I've had that where I get somewhere and set up camp and people look and say, all of that fit on there.
Yeah.
But one of the things I want to talk to you guys about, one of the wonderful things I have is this little black book. And Paul, I think you'll recognize this first entry in here. It said purchase 1995 BMW K75 RTP from BJ Meinhardt of New Cambridge, Missouri. Took delivery June 5th, 2009. 14,962 miles.
That's a rookie bike.
That's the one consecutive serial number difference to yours.
Right.
And you had told, what was the gentleman's name who had bought that bike?
Bill Marvin.
Okay, well, Bill in this book, and this was
Phil, Phil.
Phil, in this book, this was in the fairing of the bike when I got it after it had been stored for 12 years. And I'm not sure if you guys know Keith Smith from Dallas, but Keith did the mechanical restore on the bike and made sure he got me this book with it. every gas stop, every trip, every mile that Phil put on that bike is in this book.
Yeah.
So I can see his travels, his trips when he went to Vermont. Since I've had the bike, I took it from Dallas to Richmond, Virginia, and then over to the East Coast. And then last summer, I went from Dallas to Redmond, Oregon, and then up to visit my daughter in Seattle and back. Did about 5,000 miles in 2 weeks. So I can see where he had taken the bike to the East Coast and all around. And since I've had it, I've been from the East Coast to the West Coast. And
Uh, as you mentioned, I have a K75 RTP police bike that is one serial number different than his. I forget
yes,
which one is the lowest and which one's the highest, but
yep,
both of those bikes and one more, which Phil and I could never find, started life as police bikes in the Lawrence, Kansas Police Department. And one of the reasons the mileage on those bikes are so low is that they didn't use them for regular traffic patrol. They used them for the homecoming parade and
yep.
traffic control during a funeral procession and other events, but they didn't really use them very much at all.
Yeah, well, I can tell you when Phil picked it up, when I picked it up, it had 37,000 miles on it. So he put over 15,000, 16,000 miles. And it is tickling 60,000 miles at this point.
Right.
It other than since July to now where I haven't been riding because of the risks, it didn't spend a lot of garage time.
Yeah.
It was my daily commuter and my long haul bike as well. So the
I'm absolutely convinced that the K75 is among the very best motorcycles BMW ever built.
Oh yeah. And I'm just so happy to have that one. I've started a new logbook with the travels, but the maintenance logbook is continuing in Phil's. So all the maintenance stuff goes in there, and then the travel log is in a separate book. But Voni, one thing you're known for is the red. The red shirts, red boots, red riding outfits. Where did that start?
Well, when I started riding, everyone around me was in black leather and they had dark color motorcycles. But I was a mom. I had a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. I couldn't die. I needed, like an edge. So I was really interested in being visible as much as I could. And so I couldn't find any color at motorcycle dealerships, but the mall had a sale one time. And it was a Michael Jackson leather jacket with epaulets and all that fancy stuff that I
The
cut up.
sideways zippers.
And yeah, and then I just had a solid red motorcycle jacket, and that really helped me to stand out.
Then we went to a motorcycle rally, local rally down in near Springfield, Missouri. And at that time, there was a little BMW dealership in Springfield, Missouri. And they had their Heingierk red bibs, trouser with bib top.
Wow.
And I took one look at it and decided that she needed it.
Of course.
And I said, no, we don't have a lot of money. We can't this jacket is fine. This makes me stand out. It's good.
So we had that argument, and while she was outside doing something else, knock it off. Well, she was outside doing something else. I bought it, gave them our home address, and had it shipped there.
That way you could defer the argument until you got home.
So then, just like that R11 RS that Paul bought me for Mother's Day, about which we had a very long argument too, when I told him that bike is going to be really expensive to insure. It's going to be expensive for tires because I'm going to wear out a lot of them if I had that bike, and besides, and so we just spent the whole weekend arguing. But Tuesday morning we went into Engel Motors, and Paul said, "It's yours."
I'd already told the dealer on Saturday that we were buying the bike. Sharpen your pencil.
Yes.
That that was in the spring in Kansas City. It was a dreary day, but it was the unveiling of this brand new model R1100 RS.
Beautiful
Yeah.
bike.
This was in 93 and it was May of 93 and it was titled as a 94 model.
Mhm.
And I'd been reading in motorcycle magazines about this bike with the telelever front end, which I didn't even understand what that was. And all of this incredible stuff that this bike was coming together to be. And so when we drove in, all I wanted to do was see it.
Engel Motors,
Maybe even sit on it, but I had no clue.
Engel Motors in Kansas City was having an open house with donuts in the morning and hot dogs at noon.
Yep.
And who can pass that up? But she didn't have any riding gear or anything. And
We came in the car because it was 40 degrees and cold.
so Norman Jones, who was then the principal owner, said, "You need to take this bike for a ride." They had two of them, which were in the first shipping container to come into the US.
Right.
And so they were using one as a demo. And Norman said to Voni, "You need to ride this thing."
No.
I mean,
I don't have any helmet. He
uh,
said, I have a helmet.
I can
So,
find
so
you.
you're at a dealership arguing that you don't have a helmet is a non-starter.
Yeah, so he fit me out with what I felt was sufficient safety. And I got on the bike and I started it up and oh my gosh, that sound. Oh, it was so beautiful. And I eased my way out into traffic and got up to the first stoplight and I stopped and I'm just shaking all over because I'm so excited to ride this bike. And the light changed and I just gently hit the throttle and suddenly I was 2 blocks ahead of everyone behind me. That bike just took off. And then I merged onto the interstate and it was just so incredible. And I came back to the dealership. I drove in and Paul said, "What do you think?" And I just couldn't stop screaming. I had no words. I just was screaming. And he
So
said, that's the first time he said, "It's yours."
So we bought the other one they still had. It was downstairs in the box, but we bought it. And I told them on Saturday we were going to buy it. And they uncrated it and did all of that. And then she and I
Right.
argued till Tuesday morning.
Another argument I lost.